HOA cut power to my home during a storm. Didn't know I owned the utility company. Update 1. You cut off my power during a storm, I said into the howling wind, barefoot, wrapped in a soaked blanket, flashlight clenched between my teeth. Karen from the HOA smiled like she'd just won the lottery. Rules are rules, she said, sipping cocoa on her perfectly lit porch. That's when I decided. No more warnings, no more second chances. If she wanted to mess with the grid, she was about to find out who built it. The storm had rolled in just after sunset, a slow thunderous approach that soaked the streets and rattled windows until the whole neighborhood huddled indoors. Everyone's porch lights flickered on automatically, including mine, except mine didn't stay on. Within minutes, my entire house went pitch black. No power, no heat. My smart thermostat went dead. My security system chirped once before fading, and worst of all, the fridge stopped humming. A problem considering I just stocked it with over $500 of groceries. At first, I assumed it was a simple outage. I walked outside to check, expecting to see a blackout down the whole street, but every other house glowed like a Christmas tree. My neighbors' lights were fine. Their ACs hummed, TVs flickered behind curtains. Even the inflatable flamingo in Dave's front yard was still flapping in the rain. Mine was the only house in total darkness. I went back inside and tried rebooting the system from my phone. Error, I logged into my utility dashboard. Access denied, a new message appeared at the bottom. Power service suspended due to HOA violation. Contact HOA administrator. I froze. Since when did they have any authority over my utility service? A sharp knock echoed from the front gate. I pulled my coat tighter and trudged out into the rain with a flashlight. On my gate, sealed in a plastic sleeve, was a bright orange violation slip with Karen's signature at the bottom. Unauthorized generator use. HOA code 8B7, immediate disconnection mandated. I laughed out loud, confused and furious. Generator use, I didn't even have it running. The storm hadn't knocked anything out yet, and my solar system was on standby, waiting for grid failure that never came, because technically the grid didn't fail, it was cut. I marched through puddles to Karen's porch, where she stood smugly watching the rain from behind her glass door. She didn't even flinch when I banged on it. When she finally opened it, she looked at me like I was a drowned rat who'd wandered into the wrong suburb. Karen, I said, my breath fogging in the cold. You cut my power. No, the HOA did, she corrected, smug as ever. Your solar backup was flagged as non-compliant. Grid-tied systems aren't allowed to auto-engage without HOA review. It's in the bylaws. My backup wasn't even on. I snapped. And even if it was, you don't have the authority to cut residential power. She smiled like that was the punchline. Well, maybe we don't, but we did. And if you want it back, you'll have to submit a compliance review, pay the fine, and wait for board approval. You know the drill. Then she sipped her cocoa. I stood there, soaking wet, watching her living room lights gleam behind her like a warm stage set while I stood freezing in the cold. Something in me snapped, not rage, not desperation, something cleaner, calculated, cold. I turned away mid-sentence, and walked home without another word. Let her think she'd won. Let her enjoy her moment because the next one would belong to me. I entered my home through the side door, heading straight to the locked utility room. Behind 2 layers of biometric security, I opened the door to my private command center. Monitors glowed to life, one after another, illuminating the room in soft blue light. Status dashboards, live feeds, diagnostic tools, and one central control screen at the far end that read, "Welcome Administrator." Because here's the thing, Karen didn't know. She thought I was just another homeowner. Another number in her petty HOA spreadsheet. Another nuisance to dominate with fines and citations. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just connected to the power grid. I owned it, or at least the company that ran it. I was the CEO of the regional utility provider that supplied her precious HOA and over 47 other communities with energy. The same company that signed off on her meters. The same company that managed solar integration, backups, maintenance, and yes, disconnect notices. And the only reason she had the authority to cut off my house was because she'd found an obscure compliance clause that hadn't been updated in years, buried under paperwork from 3 company acquisitions ago. That was on me, but not for long. I sat at my desk, fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard, digging into access logs. There it was, 3 hours earlier, Karen had called into the HOA's private access line, speaking with a junior tech who handled minor reconnections. Using her outdated HOA admin credentials, she'd submitted a manual disconnect request, citing code violations. The tech, new on the job, saw the HOA flag and greenlit the disconnect. A 1 in a million fluke. She thought she'd gotten away with it. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The rain tapped harder against the roof. A lightning bolt lit up the entire room for a second. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have restored my power instantly. I could have reversed the cut, overwritten her flag, and gone back to normal. But this wasn't about light or heat anymore. It was about the principle. It was about reminding people like Karen that when you play power games, you'd better know who actually holds the switch. So instead of restoring my house, I began building a case file. I pulled her call logs, captured the footage from my door camera, showing her violation slip, logged her breach of grid protocol, and cross-referenced every HOA meeting where she'd pushed unauthorized control. What she did wasn't just rude. It was illegal. She'd tampered with a regulated grid. I sent an internal message to compliance. Begin silent audit, HO Sector 19B, focus on unauthorized admin overrides. Then I cracked open a soda, sat back in my chair, and watched the storm rage outside. My house was still dark, but the wheels were already turning, and Karen was about to find out exactly how bright things could get when you poke the man who owns the light. Now you can watch the second part by pressing share and more.